Welcome to Frog Live Radio, where you will have the opportunity to meet and question some true global leaders and thinkers in the world of recruitment. We are talking to people who operate at the very cut and thrust of HR practice and intelligence. And today, Frog Live Radio is thrilled to have in our virtual studio one Steve Fogarty from Adidas Worldwide. He is the recruitment captain for Adidas. Now, Frog Live Radio is so pleased to talk to Steve today. Steve is based in Adidas, Germany, and he was recently noted as the captain of recruiting globally for Adidas, and before that, he was captain of recruiting for North America. So basically, Steve heads up the talent search for a company with global net sales of around 18 billion New Zealand dollars. He has 40,000 employees he's in charge of. And in striving for excellence, Steve is not afraid to be creative, nor is his company. For example, several years ago, they used Stella McCartney to design a special collection of limited edition clothing for Adidas. So, Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
We're looking forward to talking today, Steve. But first of all, we'd love to ask you a question that Frog Recruitment asks all their new employees, and this is the question. What was your very, very, very first job? Whether you got paid 10 cents for it or $10, what was it? How old were you, and where were you when you did it?
Oh, that's a great question, Mike. I was pretty ambitious from a pretty young age. I grew up on the East Coast of the United States in Connecticut, and I think I was walking home from middle school, which makes me, I think, around 13 years old. And I remember a guy sitting in a blue Ford pickup truck drinking a Budweiser, and he said, "Hey, kid, you want a job?" And seemed like a good prospect to me. Although I did learn my first lesson very, very quickly in choosing an employer, which is, really make sure you do have a connection with the brand. And this guy's brand was to have me rake leaves of giant yards while he drank Budweisers in his truck. So it was a pretty hard lesson, but I did love diving in and getting my experience in my first job, and I actually have worked ever since then.
Wow, so you've come a long way from those days, Steve. Tell me, where were you born? What city in the States were you born in?
I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and for anybody that knows that area, it's about 45 minutes from New York City. And I lived in Connecticut until I was around 16 years old, and my father was a product of the technology industry, and when I was 16, he came home from work, and his company went through almost 17 mergers and acquisitions since he's been there. But we got relocated out to the West Coast, and I was a West Coast guy for around 15 years. That's where I joined Adidas, and now, as you mentioned in the beginning of the show, I've made the transition over to Nuremberg, Germany, working out of our headquarters, which is about 40 minutes outside of Nuremberg, which is a 1,000-year-old Bavarian village called Herzogenaurach.
Right. So the first question, and today is the topic vaguely I'd like to say is about the war for talent, employment branding and talent acquisition. But the first question is simply, what do you do, Steve? What is your job?
Sure. So, like you said, my job starting off at Adidas was to lead the recruitment function for North America. Adidas North America is a wholly owned subsidiary. It's one of our largest subsidiaries. It's about $2 billion US dollars in revenue. That doesn't include TaylorMade and Reebok in the U.S. In most parts of the world, now we're an integrated brand under the Adidas Group umbrella. In the U.S., we have 3 distinct entities, and I led the Adidas portion of that. It was about 3,000 employees, 1,000 people in headquarters in Portland, Oregon, and another 2,000 out in our retail store operations. And really it was front-to-end recruitment, so managing the recruitment team and really looking at how to build excellence in the search side of the business, and also looking at recruitment strategy, employer branding, how we were bringing that branding to market. And that's really where I started cutting my teeth on some of the global projects, because as I took those on for North America, being one of our largest subsidiaries, a lot of these projects were so large in scope that our global headquarters became aware of it and asked me to take on some of these projects globally, and that's what eventually led into me taking on global responsibility. So just a little over 2 months ago, I made the transition to our headquarters, and really how we have our global team broken down, it's very similar to a sales and marketing organization. So we have our strategic search side, which is really kind of the hands-on sales part of our recruitment business. So we've hired people straight out of executive search firms to basically research and hand-pick talent and bring them into the organization. And then we have our strategy, branding, marketing, innovation side of the business, and that's the portion of the business that I run globally, and that's driving the demand for the Adidas Group as an employer brand to our talent. So we believe if my function's doing its job and the search function's doing its job, then we kind of break down that friction between both of them. So when a search person calls top talent, they've heard of our brand, they're familiar with it, they feel a connection, and we can get that talent in the doors much more smoothly.
Right. Got you. Now, just before we get on to that, because we're really excited today about learning about your ethos of human resources, hiring, and how you use social media, the web. But really, you've just jumped off the plane after working in the States. You're now suddenly working in Germany at head office. What we'd love to know from you is what the first day, what is the biggest difference, whether good or bad or confusing, to working from an American in the American market with American employees, with an American team, to suddenly working in Germany? Is it quite German, or is it multinational, so there's been no transition?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I mean, I had the luxury of traveling back and forth quite significantly before making the move, so I became quite familiar with the culture of headquarters. It is definitely a global organization. I had pictured before I first traveled over there a very German-centric company, and I remember my first big meeting over there. I think there were 3 Croatians in the room and a few Americans and a few people from Australia. And I mean, it just, this meeting represented almost every corner of the world. And I mean, the organization's made up of about 160 countries or locations in about 160 countries. And it's definitely a global feel, more so than I would say a purely German feel. I mean, obviously, being in headquarters, we have a lot of German employees. I would say there are some significant differences when you work in a subsidiary of a global organization. I mean, the subsidiaries are on the front lines. They are the revenue generators of the organization. So while they're deploying strategy in a subsidiary, you're also executing on all the tactics. When you move to headquarters, your role shifts in the sense that you're looking at the organization globally and you're building strategies that all these different countries around the world could deploy. And it's a very tricky thing to do, because when you're working with 160 countries, you have some countries that are at very different evolutions in how they think about recruitment, how they think about marketing, how they think about branding. And you can't necessarily just take a social media strategy working in the United States and automatically assume that's going to work in Southeast Asia. So, one of the first things that I had to do when I got to headquarters was really kind of take a step back and not make a lot of assumptions about what worked in America. Instead, I dove right into really learning from each country and each head of recruitment in these countries, really what their pain points were, what sort of technology infrastructure they had there now, what type of branding and marketing they did, because I think it's easy for a function in recruitment like branding and leveraging social media before people in every market fully understand it. It could feel a little bit mushy to them and not necessarily something that's going to automatically help solve their problem. So for me, it was really about understanding what their need is and how we can apply some of this thinking to those markets in a respectful way and in a way that was really going to help them out.
Steve, we can help you with your job because Robin Stalker is from Palmerston North in New Zealand, and he is on your board of executives. Did you realize that?
That's true.
You have a New Zealand
I did.
as your...
Yes.
So you just mentioned you're talking to us, and I'm sure you'll do very well.
Yeah, I didn't know he was from New Zealand, but he is definitely on our board and a very important member of the team. So I'm glad to hear that.
He was born in a place called Palmerston North. Now let's quickly move on, and we want to move on to some gritty stuff. We're loving this. At what point, because by the sounds of it, your ethos of HR is that it's really about internal branding, let's just say marketing and branding, human resources all go together as one. Would that be right?
I would say yes. I would say it goes even more broadly than that. I think when I think about an employer brand, it really, I would say, infiltrates just about every part of the organization. It's really the connection between the employee and the organization and how that's conveyed out into the marketplace. And I think that includes internal communications. That includes the brands of the organization, how people feel connected to the brand, the product, management behavior. It all plays into what an employer brand is and how the organization is viewed in the marketplace.
Okay, so Steve, you at the recent Australasian Talent Conference in Sydney, where you spoke, you said the following, that the shift in the talent acquisition landscape, or the intelligence around talent acquisition, has moved from the war for talent to really one of engaging and creating an experience along the lines of what you do for customers. You think the same, correct me if I'm wrong, but the same disciplines should be used for when you go out and you're trying to attract those future employees. Is that right?
That is correct.
So can you take us through the journey at Adidas, or Adidas as you call it? How have you built a worldwide acquisition function, and what caused Adidas to move from the war for talent onto this engagement and experience? What's a horror story even to start us